What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Striker. Thank you for tuning into another video from Strike Team Games. Today we're going to be throwing a little bit of love out to the Lost Relics community, and we're going to do a little recap and give you the definitive review of the 2022 Halloween event as presented by Lost Relics and the team at Cobit Labs. Major shout out to all the developers and all the community that has helped make this whole event a success. But I wanted to go ahead and give you my interpretation of everything that happened, give you a little bit of feedback in terms of my personal thoughts. We'll go ahead and discuss a little bit about what some of the community has said. Go ahead and cover some of the items. And let's just start it off, by saying that, in my opinion, the 2022 Halloween event was by far the most popular and successful event that's been hosted by Lost Relics, period, hands down. Every single event that I've experienced going back to 2020 has been an improvement, to be quite honest, from one event to the other. And this one left quite a bit of stir up in the community. There was a lot of positives. There was a lot of negatives. I'll give you my personal feedback, but to start it off, the way that the most important thing I think about the event was that, and obviously the most different thing about this event was that there really was no predetermined path to success, which I think is a big plus. I love the idea about starting an event, and players can have their own individual strategies and have their own different play styles, different ways that they want to attack the event to achieve their own personal goals. But what I like so much about this event is that it kept it fresh. In other words, like, no matter what your planning was, the way that the event rewards were structured made it to where, as you were earning things along your path, it would set you down these different branches where you would want to complete something or maybe sell something on the market. And we'll get into the specifics here going forward. But I think that was a major key that made this event successful. For OG players that are coming in, or players that have been around for, let's say, a year, you're coming in with a lot of information ahead of time on what to expect from some of the other events. So you have a little bit of a leg up in terms of new players that might be onboarding, because you have to understand event times, especially for Web3 games like Lost Relics, are times where the player base can grow, right? Developers are focusing on bringing an amount of attention to a game at a specific time. And when it comes to this Halloween event, we saw an onboarding of a lot of new players. Now, these players didn't necessarily have a major disadvantage because of this idea that as you're smashing pumpkins, as you're doing parts of the quests and of your journey, you're going down these different paths, right? So we're going to go over them one at a time, and we'll go through some of the details. So first place I want to start off with was the Wheel of Darkness. Okay, so I start here because it was pretty much the foundation of the event. If you logged in and you did your dailies, you would receive tokens to be able to spin the Wheel of Darkness. Now, the Wheel of Darkness had, in my opinion, a very good mix of blockchain items, of virtual items, and because of the event occurring over the course of 14 days, it really did feel that as time went on, you see more and more players hitting items on the wheel. You start to experience the feeling of hitting something that, again, sets you down a particular path. That enjoyment factor, that big dopamine rush, it was there. It felt good. Everyone enjoyed it. Now, I got a little lucky, speaking from the personal side of it, I got a little bit lucky that when I started the event, I hit strong. Okay, I probably hit the best item, in my opinion, from this release of items for this event, which was the Nether Band. And I hit it pretty early. So that completely changed my entire thought process in terms of how I was going to tackle the event. I'm sure at the same time on day one, a bunch of you hit other items that you then focused your strategy around. Whether you sold it immediately and got gold, whether you decided to hold on to it and see how the event progressed, you had a lot of different options. So the fact that the wheel was tied to your dailies and to trick-or-treating inside the event. So for anybody that's new watching this, especially if you're watching this at a future time, in the hub world, Talmuth, you would travel around town and you'd be going to the different houses and ringing the doorbells and getting a random, RNG item drop, either creepy coins or some other unique item for the event. But the fact that you could earn these tokens to spin the wheel, and there was really there was only a certain amount that you could really honestly earn, right? So you'd get 3 or 4 for completing your daily quests, probably 3, I believe it was. And then if you got lucky, you'd find a couple other by random RNG drops, either in pumpkins or through trick-or-treating, right? But the fact is that the feeling it gave me, and I'm sure it gave the rest of the player base, was that because you were limited to the amount of spins that you had, it really did feel fair. It did feel fair that every person that was playing the game had at least X amount of attempts to gain some of the more powerful items in the game from this event. So that felt good. It felt good knowing that, hey, I'm getting 5 or 6 spins a day, and a brand new player that's coming in probably is getting around the same. Maybe they get 3 or 4, but it's not something outrageous where one player gets a huge advantage and can do 20 or 30 spins, versus a new player that's only doing 3, 4, or 5, So you were also rewarded with tokens depending on your purchases with the shop from the Lost Relics marketplace. And we'll get into that a little bit at the end, but those were your general ways. And I think the Wheel of Darkness really set the pace. Okay, you didn't have to play the entire event, but you knew that if you went ahead and logged in and did X amount of time, 3 or 4 runs a day, you didn't have to grind super hard, that you'd get a roughly fair shot at getting some of the items just like anyone else. So I think that set a really good pace and a really good bit of understanding for how to tackle the event. Okay. The next piece and structure of the event was obviously the most common, which was finding pumpkins on your adventure. As you attempted to do these different adventures, you'd come across a multiple pumpkins per run, and these pumpkins you could then choose to sell for gold or smash them to see what each pumpkin had inside of them. That little bit of RNG there would get you something like a piece of a relic that you could sell on the market, or you also again had the choice of selling those pumpkins and using the gold to try to accumulate other items or different strategies, whether you were focusing on producing, playing the market, filling holes. There's a bunch of different opportunities you had there. And this is one of the trends that we've seen over the course of a few years, this idea of earning virtuals on your dungeons, which is rewarding the amount of time that you put in the game. So the more you grind, the more you play, you're being rewarded with more opportunities for more random drops. But then also the ability for those items to be tradable on the gold marketplace in game means that even if you weren't lucky, but you were accumulating gold slowly throughout your runs, you could still acquire the items that you wanted the most. And then it gave you an additional path to success on top of dailies, which I thought were really, really well. I also enjoyed in this event, I really liked the fact that the bartender in Talmuth's Tavern now had some virtual consumable items that you can use to give you a power-up during your adventure runs. But they also served as a very good cheap sink for creepy coins, which again were earned by smashing those pumpkins. So as you're smashing pumpkins, you're earning a in-game Halloween currency that you can then turn in for these virtual items. And I enjoyed that very much. Now, the thing I would like to question on it was just whether the community and you all that are watching can let me know whether you all thought that the amount of consumables that were there available for purchase was enough, because they ran out of stock. I would venture to say 2 or 3 days before the event finalized. So I'll put that thought out there and let the community handle that as you may. But I really did enjoy it. It gave you an opportunity to say, look, if with 1 week left, if you didn't anticipate that you were going to play enough, you could use the coins that you had to at least get a minor reward that could benefit you at a later time. And looking at some of the numbers on some of those rewards, they were pretty low. So that's really good. You got a rare item that you might be able to use in the future. Okay. So another path for success was the RNG from smashing pumpkins. Then obviously the main villain of this event, Conqueron, could be summoned in your dungeons by finding the Summoner Silver tokens, right? And these tokens could be found in multiple places. You can win them on the wheel, you can find them in pumpkins, you can buy them on the market. But it gave you the chance to fight the big baddie from 2022 Halloween event. Now, here's one of the more fascinating things that I would comment on. I really, really enjoyed how the items that were dropped had to be combined on the marketplace. So even if at the end of the event, let's assume that we had 1,000 players playing, even if there was only 200 rare items that were made from this event, the fact that those 200 were broken into 3 pieces meant that in all reality, nearly 75% of the player base, my estimations, had the opportunity to interact with this system, with this Halloween system that before would only be limited to the very lucky that got the RNG. This way, again, more opportunities to accomplish what your personal goals were, collecting the items that you thought were more powerful or that you wanted. So really enjoyed it. Now, from a personal level, I would have preferred Conqueror to be a little more difficult of a challenge, okay? Maybe a mix in between what we've seen from other Christmas events where there was a one-off instance and a boss battle versus what this felt more like was like a mini boss battle in the middle of your dungeon run. I think the mix might, a good feeling might be somewhere in the middle, throwing a random idea out there. What if the Halloween boss was summoned in a lock-in room? Inside a dungeon. So that way you have the added difficulty of being trapped in this room with the enemy. And depending on what difficulty dungeon you run, there's obviously going to be other minions around. So a little bit added difficulty would make it feel good, in my personal opinion. But I'll leave that for you all to test out. So in recap for the structure, the main 3 items that I saw here play a factor and would be your dailies, accomplishing them simply by logging in. The RNG from doing dungeon runs. Now, this is the grinding part of it. The more you grind, the more chances you have to smash pumpkins. And then the RNG from those summoner, from the boss, which could be found in multiple locations. So you could quote unquote win your item by using gold on the marketplace, by grinding a lot, by just checking in daily, or by doing a combination of all 3, and also the difficulty of fighting a boss, right? So I like the fact that there was a lot of different avenues for people to be able to participate, and I'm sure there was a lot of players that only got to see 2 or 3 of those available paths to success, while maybe some others got to interact with them all. I was lucky enough to interact with them all. And that's why I can give you a little bit of my feedback on that. Okay, so let's jump forward. Let's jump into really still event structure, but I'd like to talk a little bit about the hub world, Talmud specifically. Let's go back to the trick-or-treating and the monsters that were spawning in the hub world. I really, again, major positive feedback here because it gave you the impression that even when you're walking around town, there was something to do. You didn't feel from my perspective, you didn't feel this like burden of having to waste 30 seconds to a minute of time going from point A to point B simply because the intention is to burn time. In this case, time was burnt by doing these different little interactions, but it felt good. It felt right. I would be interested to see in more things about what the hub world, what interactions inside the hub world could look like, what that could mean for players and for the game. So, major plus there. Okay, so let's go over some of the rewards from the tournament. So I got them here. So we're gonna break them out in no particular order. Well, maybe there is a little bit of order. Let's start with relics that let's start with virtuals. So we're just gonna go down. These were some of the consumables that were purchasable with creepy coins. So the first one, Hex on the Beach, 50% crit chance over 60 seconds. I'm a big fan of increasing your crit chance because of the fact that it seems to be a new mechanic that we're starting to see come out in different items, from things like the Nether Band to things like Hex on the Beach. So major plus there. Consumable 60 seconds, not too bad for a small amount of creepy coins. Then we have Demon's Blood. We grew 20% larger and you gain 20% more attack damage. Love the consumable idea. Totally good to go there. Dark Soul. It looks like this one was the Dark Sour was you lose 30% movement speed and you gain 50% attack speed. So you're starting to see, especially with these consumables, like the playing around with like what happens when you mix these like debuffs and buffs to your character at the same time. Are the players going to think that they're worth it? Are they not? You can already see that some are moving on the marketplace. Not too bad. And then the cream of the crop in terms of the virtual items was obviously the new epic armor, the Doomerak armor that was released, which leads us to some really interesting thought concepts about where the future of Lost Relics could be heading, because now we're starting to see this increase in, well, really the introduction of monster types, which was these different types: standard, natured, mythic, aerial, pyro, and undead, right? And these new damage types I think are going to make the game even more complex, which I am extremely for reasons we'll get to at the end of the video when we talk about predictions for the future. But yes, the Doomerak armor, obviously here selling for almost 500,000 gold, 30% less damage from undead monsters. You know, acquiring all the items across these different, either Smashing Pumpkins or the Wheel, these different paths, like I keep saying, it did feel like if you were able to complete one without buying it, you had a major successful event. And if you did buy it too, I mean, hey, you're holding one of the few 600, or really, it looks like there's 331 left that are in remaining. I'm guessing some people might have lost them. So major plus here. Going down now, switching over to the blockchain items, we have Hocus Focus, which is the first one in the uncommon relic that we've seen in a long time. We haven't had an uncommon blockchain relic that are going to help people. And with the fact that it's doing some random health increases between 200 and 1,000, major plus. Like, I wouldn't even be surprised for this price. You know, not financial advice. Y'all do your own homework, but I'm looking already to pick up. I believe I have one, maybe two. I might get a couple more just because how few there are and how much they'll be in demand, especially for new players in the future, in future events when we have the onboarding of more and more players. The Eerie, summoning 3 charred Slender Bones. I have one of these, but I haven't actually experimented with it. I think this is the only item that I haven't actually used because I haven't gone into rare dungeons recently. But the idea of summoning, again, we've had the idea of using Relics virtuals to be able to summon a monster to be able to tank for us. Pretty much, I'm assuming here that these Slender Bones are also doing a little bit of tanking damage. Maybe it'd be interesting if we start to summon something that doesn't just play as a defensive tool, but has more of an offensive set, even if it's only alive for a minute, 2 minutes. I'm making up, example here. So it's going to be real interesting to see how that gets played with. The Idol of the Damned. Now this one leads to some really interesting ideas about, like, the minus 40% incoming damage could lead this relic to be pretty unique, I would say. I could see in the future where you're going into really hard dungeon runs or really random dungeon runs where for at least the boss fight that you're going to need some significant help. Even in a transcendent dungeon, I might even consider taking in one of these bad boys, because if I know for a 30-second period out of my run, I'm going to be taking massive damage, here's where I can get a majority of the utility out of this item. Goose Bumpers is the next one, in the epic tier. Now this one I'm not sure with. I think we're going to be getting some tweaks with, because it's really playing around with the idea of movement speed. And the idea of, like, poison over time. Obviously, if you slow them, it's going to take them longer before they're able to attack you, which means poison does damage over time, obviously. I have a feeling it's going to get tweaked. It doesn't feel that great to use, to be quite honest. I personally think that a lot of players have been saying that the Goose Bumpers were near the bottom of the tier list for what they wanted to accomplish. You can kind of see here selling for 300 Shadow Stones. Again, because of the fact that I think it might be tweaked a little bit in the future, I'm a buyer at cheap prices, so we'll see. Terror Tome. Okay, now the Terror Tome. Look, this is the part where we get into some of the exciting, potential futures for Lost Relics, because look, we already have an assortment of relics and weapons that do a variety of effects, and the combinations of all those effects intrigue a lot of players to do a lot of experimentation. And that experimentation just gets compounded when you think about how all of these new enemy types that have been introduced. So let's assume we go off 3-4 years into the future and we keep doing these types of relics, weapons, new enemies, new types. The how complicated it will be to combine all of these items on a run and have a dramatic effect. I think it will lead to a point in time where even the developers of the game might not anticipate how the player base will use items or will not use items, which I think that's key. A balance between, you know, the ideas that are being put forth by the developers and how the game is being actually played by the players will make for an interesting dance that I think will lead to items being nerfed, items being buffed, new metas coming into play. Not and especially the idea that I don't think that there's going to be this one overall meta that everyone's like, this is the cream of the cream of the crop, which I think is a major bonus. I'd love the idea of being like, well, if you're running epics, this is a really good cheap meta. If you're running legendaries, this might actually work better. If you're trying to focus on speed, you do this. If you're trying to work on damage output, this, you know. So that's major. When I look towards the future about what Lost Relics could bring forward, I think that's really intriguing. Going into different dungeons runs where the combinations, even by just your initial sight, won't be obvious to a lot of people until you start to tweak it and get really in depth with the numbers for all the nerds that are out there, like me. So, okay, now we're going to jump to the big boys. Okay, these are the legendary rewards from the event that were available, starting off with the Dark Torment. 10% chance to perform an AoE attack that stuns your enemies. I think this is pretty much in line with a lot of the other events. You know, there's some very specific event weaponry that does unique styles of damage. So in this case, it's a stun. You know, with the Easterly Wind Chaser, we can go ahead and spawn the tornado. Or with the Santa Slay, you can slow or freeze the opponent. So again, I like the idea about an AoE attack, and we're seeing it into play. More to come on this at the very end of the video, so pay attention. The Bone Ripper. The Bone Ripper, obviously right now, within the community, there's a big discussion on ammo and your ability to be able to create arrows, use arrows, the gold that comes with it. You know, if you're a forger, you're able to produce your own arrows. If you're not, you're buying them off the market. So you have to make sure you have a good price for them. So a 30% chance to preserve arrows, I think that's going to be a valuable concept for any player in general. Bows are typically rarer than melee weapons, so that gives it a little bit more importance. And right now, you could say that we're in a melee type of meta, where, you know, the swords, the axes, the hammers are all considered your first line of offense, with range being your second thought. Then we jump over to the Necrofancy, and I'm actually kind of shocked here that not more people enjoy. I'm interpreting what the price of the item right now selling on the market is saying, but it's pretty much saying that people, I think, aren't giving enough credit to this critical chance increase and even damage output increase. I personally think it's near the top tier of items in all items of the game. It's borderline to make. Granted, I have a lot of relics that I'm able to equip, but it's borderline on that list where I may include it in a run or I may not. So, in general, if it's borderline for me, I would say for most of the player community, it would be an almost always equip. But looking at the price here, maybe that's not the case. I'd be really interested to get your feedback. And that pushes forward into probably the number one item of the game, which I was lucky enough to hit right at the very beginning, the Netherband. And it's just got a significant price increase versus the Necrofancy, and maybe it's because it has the guaranteed melee damage. Obviously, we're in a melee meta, like I just said, so you're pretty much pushing forward the meta even harder. You're leaning into it, trying to get the most out of your items that you can. I think by far, just by reading the items before the event even started, this was my original goal to obtain this, and this is the reason why I changed my entire strategy once I was able to acquire it on day either 1 or 2. I'm not sure. It might have been the end of day 1 or the beginning of day 2 when I ended up getting it. So overall, the way that I see all these items in general is you have to look at it from two perspectives. One, the current player base. Are these items changing your loadouts? And I think if the answer is yes or maybe, then it was a successful launch of new items into the game. From the current player standpoint. From a new player standpoint, I think a majority of these items, for sure all the items in the legendary tier, and I would say probably 50% of all the other items, all of them would give new players the chance to be able to get an item right now, or to be able to get an item during this Halloween event that is going to be a top tier item in their loadout. If they're a brand new player and you participated in the event and you were able to hit one of these legendaries or acquire one, it's by far guaranteed to be in your loadout, no questions asked. The other items more than likely will also get in. It depends if you're a player that's wanting to play for free completely or someone that's willing to put in a little bit of funding to get started and to be able to move forward from there. So not too bad, I would say, with the overall weapons and relics that were released. Major plus there. Now, let's get into probably the biggest or most discussed part of this event, which was the leaderboard heroes offering grind. I've left it out of the structure portion of this discussion, mostly because I knew that the fact that it was limited to only 10 people meant that it wasn't going to be reasonable for most players to attempt or to successfully achieve. Okay, because of that, there's a lot of different ways to look at it. This is where a lot of the pros and the cons come in. Okay, so a lot of the negative arguments that we hear are things along the lines of, well, only 10 people can acquire it. It's unrealistic for you to want to put in these many hours for the game. You're not guaranteed that you know what is in these items until you open the chests. So there's negatives there. There's also negatives about that the method of acquiring them. To get on the leaderboard, you needed to destroy or kill slender bone enemies in these dungeons, and they were populated in every single dungeon, so every player had a chance to go ahead and obtain these or to slay these monsters. So that's what I would say some of the negatives are. What are some of the positives? Well, it reinforces the idea of grinding. Obviously, from the developer perspective, if you're wanting to incentivize players staying within your game, especially during event time, right? You're wanting to be as populated as possible. You're wanting to have players, working together, being able to sell on the market. You're wanting to have a lot of activity all at the same time. And the leaderboards really did give a feeling, and really honestly, people started to look at the leaderboards and started to root for certain players. If your friend was on the leaderboard, you were pulling for them the entire time. If other people were looking at the leaderboards and saying, like, I'm just shocked by how many hours these people are committing. Other people were right on the bubble, maybe 13th place, 15th place, 20th place, saying, you know what, I can get there. I just got to crack the top 10, So there's a lot of different pros and cons. I'm going to just give you my personal perspective. I'll leave it there for your interpretation. Go ahead and leave a comment about your agreement or disagreement with what I say next. But here's the main thing. Number one, I think there definitely needs to be a reward specifically for grinders. And I understand that reward will segment part of the community. But in all honesty, there is a value for the amount of time that you put in terms of playing, and there's a value in terms of the amount of economic value you bring into the game, which would be by purchasing pendants, by purchasing shop items, by turning engine into shadow stones, contributing to the economy. So it's really a combination of both. I look at it from the quote unquote labor standpoint, which is the grind aspect. You're putting in the hours, and there needs to be a value associated with those hours. Now, every single person is going to have a different value on your own personal time. So I'll let the market handle that. But I do think players putting in time need to be rewarded. In this case, the top 10 is a part where I would have done slightly different. I like the idea of the entire 14 days, you getting it down to a select few. But honestly, when I saw the leaderboard go up and I already saw the first 24 hours, I knew immediately that looking at the grinders that were there, the top 4, top 5 were guaranteed after day one. I already knew. I was like, these guys are going to hit it. I don't know what place they're going to finish, but they're already in the lead. They're not going to give up that lead for 14 days if they anticipated to be able to try for it over the course of the entire event. If it was me, what I might have done is I might have broken it up into 2 different leaderboards. Week 1, top 5, and week 2, top 5. That way, once you hit week 2, players that at a later point in time weren't able to participate in the beginning of the event felt like they had a chance to start all over again. I may have also increased it. I might have done top 10 week 1, top 10 week 2. So there's a lot of different structures you can play with to kind of make it feel like more people have a chance. But it's going to be an iteration. I'm guessing we're going to start to see this over the course of time. The biggest thing here, right, is that a lot of players were putting in time into a game, not understanding or realizing what their rewards could be. And there's a power to that. You take a look at the items that were guaranteed to drop and were listed on the Medium article, and you can make your own interpretation if it's worth it to play or not. This is something that I think not knowing what the rewards will be just created this fascination, which gave, again, positive and negative sentiment. So it is what it is. Again, I think there's ways to tweak it, but I do think it's a valuable concept that I think should progress forward with improvements over time. That being said, let's go into a little bit of the rewards that were actually available in the Heroes offerings if you finish top 10. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll read off here. So at this current time, or within the past couple hours, today is November 23rd in the United States, specifically. At this time specifically, there's been 8 out of 10 Heroes offerings open. So we haven't seen the full amount of rewards. Okay, number one reward that almost every person that is every person that's opened a chest so far has already been guaranteed 150,000 gold. Okay, every single person got that gold reward simply by opening the chest. I think it's good. 150,000 I think is a fair floor in terms of the reward for the amount of time you put in. Maybe if you wanted to argue, I can make an argument for 300,000. I can make an argument for double. I could see that. I could also see gold being replaced with pendants in the future. Or maybe pendants being thrown in somewhere along the lines there too. So there's that item. Everybody got those. Now I'm going to read off the lists of the people that have opened and what they got out of them in no particular order. So minion number 2 was found, which is the cosmetic items that are available on the shop. Iron Fang, the Dart Heart Medallion, the Zigzag Zeal, Grizzlax, the Morph, a Scorn, a Rain of Fire, and the Queen's Misery. Okay, so first off, the fact that the Queen's Misery, a transcendent, a mythical, and three legendary, either relics or weapons, I guess, for the transcendent. The fact that those were included, major success in terms of the rewards. This was tricky, guys. You have to think about it. Like from Cliff and Corey's perspective, choosing what the rewards would be was a very important notion, okay? Because of the fact that it was blind. You wanted people to feel like the amount of time and effort that they put in was successful, but you also didn't want to make it feel like someone dedicated all of this amount of time and at the end of the day regretted it. Okay, now there has been some discussion about regrets and whether or not people, especially people that didn't make the top 10, have made comments about whether or not they thought that it was a good system simply by looking at the rewards. But let me put this forward. Not understanding that this was blind, the opportunity for you to be one of 10 people to be able to win by RNG a transcendent, and not only a transcendent melee weapon, but one of the most discussed transcendent items in the game, with one of the most unique effects, that by itself is rewarding to me. If you were to tell me right now that the entire, like just going in and playing Lost Relics today, that 1 out of the next 100 runs would lead to someone finding a legendary, if I knew that right off the top of my head, that would make it much more, that would make it easier for me as a player to say, look, I'm going to go attempt to be one of those 100. Okay. And that's for a legendary, right? You're guaranteeing that out of 10 people, you get an opportunity to find a transcendent. Like, that's not something that comes every day. I mean, just go look at how many transcendents drop, period. Forget about all the other items. Okay. I mean, throw in the Rain of Fire, a transcendent and mythical. You're guaranteed that you have a 1 in 5 chance, a 1 in 5 chance. So participating for 14 days to have a 1 in 5 chance, I think it's worth it to me. Everything else after that is icing on top of the cake. But that icing is some pretty nice items. Okay. The Scorn, obviously, the Iron Fang, you know, the ones that I think people are a little more upset with are like the pets and the cosmetics and the morphs that were included, that are able to be purchased from the shop. I see these more as, I feel that they're legitimate rewards for earning top 10. Okay, now you can make the argument that, hey, someone put in, I don't know, 10 to 12 hours a day for 14 days, and all they do is walk out with an item that you could buy from the shop. That will probably drop in price. Like, yes, I mean, I get it. That might not feel great. But that wasn't the perspective of how people were feeling right before they opened the item, right? Now, you had the option to sell, I believe, the Heroes offering. But, I mean, I personally think that that having them there as, if you want to consider them pity rewards, that's fine. You could look at it like that. I'm more excited about seeing some more of these again, with the remix of how this can grow and adapt in the future. I think could be very important. I think they're good. They're a good consolation prize for finishing top 10 in an event where you could have done this without putting in any money. You simply had to put in your time. And there is a difference, obviously, between putting in economic value through, you know, either crypto or fiat versus simply time within the world. Yeah, go ahead and leave me your feedback there on what you think on that end. My personal opinion, I think it was okay, and I think it will be improved upon for the future. That's my general recap of the entire event. The pros, you know, the structure, the onboarding of new players, the specific items that are available in this event, I think are going to be, again, some top tier items for a lot of players going on for a year to 2 years. So major pluses there. The negatives, you know, maybe I would have worked a little bit more in terms of how many people could qualify for those final rewards. Maybe I would have, I mean, again, I'm not a developer. You're going to have to stay with me here. But maybe making some of this a little more clear prior to the event so people knew what you were getting into beforehand. That's fine. But honestly, guys, the market tells us everything. And honestly, the feedback about I'm not able to get into the top 10, which means it's a bad feature, I don't think that's merited because of the fact that you look at the leaderboard and there were people that were willing to put in that time for simply the chance. So the question just is, how many can you reward, and how many, and with what should you reward them? So major props, you know, overall. You're looking into the future about what Lost Relics and what this event might mean. Couple of big things here, and this is complete speculation. Is the part where we get to the pie in the sky dreaming here about what could potentially happen. Number one, the structure about putting all these items together on the gold marketplace. Great idea. I would love to see how an event structure could look like if that same idea was used, but on the blockchain emporium portion of the market. Allow players to buy and sell and trade. Well, maybe not trade yet, but buy and sell to be able to craft the actual item that's done at the very end. Or one way or another. The idea here, again, that I'm looking at is stimulating the blockchain economy inside the game, because that's going to help fund treasury, that's going to help onboard new players, that's going to help with a fee that's going to go back to the developers in the future, and we're not there yet. I'm talking about years down the future. If the game gets to the point where we're successful enough where that emporium accounts for 80-90% of all the transactions, of the entire game, and that income may be sustainable enough for Lost Relics to be able to use it to fund development, for to contract for new services, for merch, for different programs with streamers. It could be anything. But that is the pie in the sky dream right now that all crypto games are really trying to achieve. Axie had it for a little while and has lost it. Is that something that's actually able to be done and be proven out over time? We will see. But I think a majority of us do believe that there is a lot of potential there. So we're going to just have to see how it goes out. So there's that one. I would love random thoughts again and speculation. I would love to see that the leaderboard concept appear in different parts of the game. So I'd love for the leaderboard to not just only be in the tavern, but maybe it was there for, reasons like the system needed to load to be able to update and populate it, and it might not be able to be done everywhere. I just see it more as a way that as a spectator of the event, as you're watching your favorite players and streamers compete, you can then follow along their path and their journey as they go. I'd love to see more information about people that are dropping in and out of that bubble of the 10 spot, so I could be able to see like let's look at the interesting race. How's it going? Who's doing what? Why are they doing it? I think it just leads to a lot more commentary and a lot more different perspectives about how the game can interact with the community. Last one here on the Founders Token bonuses. Every single event, Founders Token bonuses have been improving and improving and improving. And this event, with getting more and more pumpkins available each day, I enjoyed. I do think it needs to be a little bit more, especially for the founders. Look, I know there's been discussions in the past that, hey, as the development team, they don't really get any benefit out of supporting a founders token over time that's trading players' hands. I understand that perspective, but at the end of the day, from an outsider's perspective that's looking in the game, the founders that are having a blue title or having whatever reward that come with it are going to be a very important class, in my opinion, from the game as it shifts from players' hands to players' hands, because it is the idea of carrying the torch forward to the next generation of players that come in. So I do think founders. I do think there needs to be something a little bit more for founders. What that is, it's hard to say. But the fact that it's been improving and doing a little bit more every day or every event has been an overall success. So I think that's where we're going to cap it and leave it here for right now, guys. I hope you enjoyed the event. Do me a favor. If you really enjoyed the content, go ahead and hit the sub button and give us a like here at Strike Team Games. I'm wanting to do some more content for you all. This one obviously going out to the Lost Relics family. Cliff, Corey, congratulations. Major job on what you pulled off. Thank you for everything you do. Look forward to the next event, and we're going to leave it here. For right now, this is Striker signing out. I'll catch y'all next time. Peace.